Okay, well, I was using my older phone, which is what I thought I had used before. Maybe I used it yesterday, and it got to 24 minutes, and the phone overheated, and it shut off. It shut the camera down. So I didn't take a break, not really. I'm going to continue. This is part 2 of this epic vulnerable video. So I wanted to take this class, this James Joyce class, and I signed up for it, and I got into it, and I had the best time. I had a really, really good time. One of the assignments, it's, an 8-week class, and one of the assignments was to read the entirety of Ulysses. I had tried to read Ulysses several times before in my life, never could complete it, never could get focused enough. So here to have, twice a week a lecture explaining what we were supposed to read that week in our reading got me focused, and I was able to read the entirety of Ulysses. It was a tremendous experience. But this class reawoke my original interest in English literature and writing that I had when I first went to college, back when I was, 18. I wanted to be an English major. I wanted to become a writer, and felt, like that was kind of my calling, my destiny. And there's many other times in my life when I've done writing, and writing is definitely something I can do pretty well. But so James Joyce led to me looking at other classes in that department. And so I started taking less anthropology classes and more English classes. One in particular that was kind of life-changing was a playwriting class, and I wrote a play. I wrote a 3-act play, and I said, this is it. This is what I am meant to be doing. Because this really fulfilled my heart. Anthropology was very mental for me, and it was almost too mental, and I really didn't see, well, I did kind of have a clear vision of where I wanted to go with it. I wanted to go into what they called medical anthropology. Anyway, I wrote this play that was completely from my heart. It was completely creative experience. I shared it with the owner of the Irish pub in Santa Cruz because it was an Irish story, and I kind of envisioned it taking place in a pub. Well, it did. The story took place in a pub. And this guy, this owner, Chris Matthews was his name, he was a playwright. And as it turned out, I actually spent hours inside his pub writing the scenes and dialogues from this play. And this felt like me. This felt like, this is me. This is what I am supposed to do. So then I started having this flip-flopping going on. But, you've put all this time into the anthropology, and you want to go and become a medical anthropologist. My other part of my soul calling was to become a healer. And in 1989, I had a breakdown. Yeah. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. God, I didn't even talk about that. Excuse me, I keep swearing. I don't like to swear. But when I had that breakdown in 89, there was no bipolar in it. It was now that I was older, since I had had this head injury, that extreme moods were starting to happen. I got so high thinking about other plays that I could write. It almost became like a spiritual experience for me. And it was. I had one play. I probably had 2 or 3 running through my mind at a time, but I had one that I took to such heights of visualization just in my imagination. And what the goal of my storytelling in this playwriting was to give the viewers a spiritual experience, like an awakening experience. And in that imagination, I started to have epiphanies. And I kept thinking of a series of plays I could do that would lead people to have these spiritual, it was like a spiritual revolution I was envisioning being part of making happen. And there came a point, I'm not remembering this as well as I could remember it, 10 years ago, but there was one of these getting trains of thought that I got stuck on for like a week. And it kept building up, getting more beautiful, more spiritual. And then I hit the top, and I was like at the top of this mountain. And I got up and I looked around, and I said, with all this new awareness you have, with all this insight you're gaining through this experience of creating this story, it's not what you think it is. And it's going to lead to, it popped, the bubble popped, and I everything just collapsed. It was like in an instant, I hit that acme thought of the beauty of this story, and then I said, but you know what? It's not going to do anything. It's not going to change the world. It's not going to change you. And that was a manic experience. That was a manic that built up over a week, and then it cracked, and I fell into an abyss. I was in pure bright light on top of this mountain. I think that's a bus or something. I'm at the bus stop in my car. I think that was a bus. I fell into this abysmal depression. I said, oh my God, everything I thought I could do through this path is nothing. It's nothing. And I couldn't crawl up out of that abyss. So, yeah, can you see the bus? No, not really. I couldn't get up out of this depression. This was the worst depression I had ever felt. All my hopes, nothing, down to dust. And I was seeing a therapist at school about my depression that I had been having. And I went in and I saw him, I say, I think something different is going on. And I explained it to him. And he goes, oh, that sounds like mania. That sounds like maybe you've got bipolar disorder. And then I started to look back. There were other similar experiences like this that had occurred, but they were like building in intensity. But this one cracked my heart and my mind so badly, I became instantly suicidal. And I remember for 2 weeks, I was in a pattern of, I could go walking across campus. I could walk, 20 yards or something. And in that 20 yards, I would see 3 or 4 different ways that I could self-harm and possibly kill myself. Like climbing up to a balcony and jumping off, or seeing a tree with a limb that I could tie a rope around and hang myself from. These ideations were constant. And they weren't to the point, though, of me feeling like acting on them, but the visuals were terrifying to me. And that I felt like the need to explore, that kind of avenue of action was just terrifying. I couldn't shake it. It just got worse and worse. And so after about 2 weeks, I said, this is it. I can't carry on like this. And I was talking to somebody online in a AOL chat room or something about depression, and they said, yeah, you've got bipolar disorder. And they said, I know a doctor who you should see. And so I got an appointment with this doctor and told her my story. One appointment, an hour-long appointment, told her what was going on. She said, you're lucky that I'm not going to decide to hospitalize you, but I'm going to take care of you. And so she started to give me pills. She started to give me a lot of pills. The other thing that she did was she signed me up for disability, Social Security disability, which was approved like instantly. This was back in 1998, and not even a month passed and I got my first check. And I've been living off of that check since 1998. I still get it. Yeah, so that doctor was a two-edged sword. I agreed to accept her designation of this title and accept her form of treatment, but boy, did it get out of hand. It got out of hand. I mean, in 6 months, these pills, I don't even know if I can remember what they were called. Depakote was one, lithium was another, Wellbutrin was another. Those main three, in 6 months, I put on 50 pounds. I put on 50 pounds of weight. I weighed like 190 before I started the pills. And I've never been able to get all of that weight off. But that was, that's 25 years ago. But those medications took me into a deeper depression. I was not going to school anymore. I moved back home with my mom. My mom was taking care of me. Billy was living there. My brother was living there. She was taking care of us all. This was a huge period of the sainthood of my mom. 5 years went by. 5 years went by of being on this huge regimen of medications. I saw different psychiatrists. None of them said, oh, you don't need this. You don't need this. There's another way. None of them helped me that way. The other thing that developed was, what's that thing that's the fear of being in public? I can't remember what it's called. Agoraphobia. I had never had agoraphobia before. I got it bad. The only time I could leave the house was to go to my doctor appointments. Okay, shoot, I'm going into so much detail. Later, when I started seeing different doctors, I saw a psychologist at one point. Psychologist did a lot of testing, and the psychologist ended up changing my diagnosis from bipolar to schizoaffective. When between the years of 89 and 95, when I was involved with the ashram, I did a lot of I don't know what to call it, New Age therapy. One of the things I did, or two different variations of it, was this stuff called breath work. And it's a form of therapy. You breathe to get into these altered states of consciousness. And when you get into these altered states of consciousness, if you breathe hard enough and you go deep enough into the process, you can start to have visions. visions came instantly to me, and they were profound, and they were life-changing, and I loved them. So this might have been actually an early sign of a healthy form of manic thinking and behavior. But they were like a drug to me. I was like, can we go breathe? Can we go do another breath session? I want to see what visions I can conjure up. The breath work cracked open that realm of my experience, but in the ashram, the chanting and the meditation that I learned how to do caused it to continue and become more normalized for me. So I was starting to have visions in meditation without having to breathe. And when I started to see this psychologist, I started to describe some of these experiences. And they came up with this new name for what this was: schizoaffective. Schizoaffective is being bipolar, but also having visions. And if I hadn't done the breath work, I probably never would have started having visions. But the visions, and there was another thing too that kind of freaked out the doctors. I said I could talk to trees. I used to have an ability to connect with trees, with the spirit energy in trees. I don't have it anymore. They burned it out of me with the medication. The two medications they gave me that burned out my visions and my ability to talk to trees was Risperdal and Seroquel. And those were terrifying medications. Okay, anyway, where am I going with this? So, I wasn't really going to talk about how I came out of the bipolar, because I'm not like that anymore. But I guess I should wrap it up with that. So 5 years on the medication, then I finally started to say, I'm not getting better. These pills are not making me better. And I decided to take control of how much I took, and I started to cut back on the amounts that I took. All the way to the point where after a year, I completely had stopped taking everything. And then I went for a whole year with no medications. And I felt like myself again. That was when I made my first attempt to go back to college since dropping out of UCSC. I dropped out of UCSC. I do not have my diploma from there. I went back to DVC, got into a anthropology class with an amazing teacher, and something else happened. I got this creative spark going back to wanting to be a writer, and I started to write a novel. I spent the next many years, 7 years probably, working on this novel. I also started to do photography again. That's what led to the eventual concert photography. And my claim to fame was the Cemetery Girl photo project, which was an adjunct to the novel I was writing. That all came back to me after stopping medications. Then there was a setback where my general practitioner, I just kind of mentioned it to him in passing. I said, yeah, hey, I'm feeling really good, and I'm not taking my meds anymore. And he kind of freaked out, and he said, if you don't take your meds, I'm not going to be your doctor anymore. So I started to take a minimal dose of some other meds that weren't as bad as what I had been on before. And did that for a couple of years. Wasn't happy with the results. And then I discovered the magic of Kratom. Kratom is the most miraculous form of healing I've had an experience with in regards to my mental health in my lifetime. And That's a whole nother video to talk about. Okay. I think that might be it. I can't hold a regular job out of this story, a lot of the details out of this story. My ability to hold regular jobs has been broken. I should have been a perfect employee at Pete's. All the years I spent writing my novel was in cafes, and I love cafes. I love the atmosphere of a cafe. It was a perfect place for me. But I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. There were a lot of reasons why I couldn't do it. I'm really going to skip over this and not go into the detail that I could or should. So, okay, this is me being vulnerable. This is me being authentic. This is me telling you like the big story of my life, or at least a big chunk of how I am, who I am today. And I signed on to go door dashing at 3 o'clock. That's in 14 minutes. So I'm going to cut this off here. I'm going to go see if I can get an order or two. And then, yeah, hey, I made 2 videos today. If you got this far, thank you so much. Okay.